Today, I would like to talk a little bit about Shirow Masamune's Ghost in the Shell. This is encompassing Ghost in the Shell 1, 1.5, and 2. So one of the things that's really interesting about Ghost in the Shell is how exceedingly dense it is. A lot of times when you're pouring through the work, there are these really extensive notes on the bottom of the page that are talking a lot about the philosophy behind the work, that are also talking a lot about gear and technology, about what may be possible in the future, about why these ideas are springing to the author's mind in creating this work. And honestly, to me, that is one of the most interesting and most worthwhile aspects of Ghost in the Shell. Unfortunately, there's a really big negative to reading Ghost in the Shell, and that is that the author, Masamune sensei, is incredibly perverted. Incredibly perverted. So much so, I think after this work, I think he created, if I remember correctly, he created a single work that got him noticed by one of the major publishing houses in Japan. Then he created Appleseed with their help, which was also extremely dense. Then he created Ghost in the Shell, and from there kind of became a hentai author after penning this work, or these works, these Ghost in the Shell works. It might be one of the most perfect cyberpunk aesthetics, which is really something to behold. I mean, the late 80s into the early 90s, projecting this kind of vision off into the future, that's really kind of a beautiful relic of that time that had all of this hope for what technology could do for man. Unfortunately, a lot of that hope is also built into the ideological perspective underlining the cyberpunk aesthetics that Masamune sensei sought to utilize, and that ideology basically is kind of the pinnacle of the atheistic vision of man that was pregnant in the air of the time that this work was being penned. So it really views the human person as nothing more than basically a stage in the evolutionary flow of life, and that the next natural place for this flow to go is into artificial life forms and things of that nature. It kind of plays itself out when you see just how perverted the aesthetic really is. There's not an awful lot of redemptive qualities to the vision of the cyberpunk world as Masamune sensei sees it. Because while you have these pseudo-transcendental images that are given over to the work of seeing man being able to kind of escape the physical shell into the digital realm, and that this is maybe liberating, and maybe this is the transcendental image of God, a lot of times you have these notes that Masamune sensei is penning at the bottom of the work, talking about how God is this necessary fabric of kind of myth. And when he talks about myth, he doesn't mean it as a symbolic value that is added on top of the images, the ideas, and the language of man, but rather just a fictional construct, just as significant as Ghost in the Shell is, which obviously, if anybody has even the most basic understanding of symbol, which one would expect an artist like Masamune sensei to have, they would realize that that's just self-evidently false. So you get this kind of really perverted image of female characters. There's even a specific instance towards the end of the work where there's a robotic character, or at least an android character. I think she's a robot fully, but she gets hit with a strong attack and falls back. One of her arms gets ripped off, so she falls back into a position that normally a blast of that matter, or a blast of that magnitude rather, would have completely flattened you. But she somehow, even with one arm, is able to fall back on the one arm just enough to like fully reveal her undergarments. So, I mean, that's the kind of vision that you have in Ghost in the Shell, one that really does treat kind of the world, even the most powerful characters in this work, even the most transcendent and beautiful characters in this work are treated really just as a piece of visual appetizer for the will to kind of further express itself. So it's kind of this really actually fairly weak understanding of Nietzschean philosophy, but where it really flourishes is this love of tech, this kind of otaku nerd sphere that something like Gundam, I think, does exceedingly well at in some of its endeavors. Ghost in the Shell is really kind of right alongside there. The kind of military and tech gear otaku world is really that's probably the most beautiful set of expressions in this work. A lot of the ideas about identity are really interesting to contemplate here. They're pretty dated. They're pretty caught up within that kind of late 80s, early 90s kind of cutting edge technic philosophy. And it really makes Ghost in the Shell something that's pretty disappointing, I think, ultimately to read. It's very dense. But the density is kind of constantly undercut and self-mocked, I think, on accident because of the representation of the ideological philosophy within the aesthetics themselves. So ultimately, I think Ghost in the Shell is quite an interesting relic of its time. I don't think that it's particularly worth seeking out if you haven't read it already. I think the anime films are a little bit easier to take. They're a little less perverted, which is kind of funny. If you see them, you'll see why. But they boil down kind of a little bit more the central questions. Although it's more popularized in the film, there's a lot less of this really dense technological philosophy going back and forth between the author of the work and the work itself. Ultimately, an extremely frustrating read for that reason. The Kodansha publication of the work, too, is also, you can hear it. It's very poorly put together. And for a work that's $54.99 American dollars, I mean, I can't really recommend it. It's really a frustrating work. So that is what I wanted to talk to you all about today. Let me know what you think about this work in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. And at some point here in the future, I'll look forward to talking about some more work with you guys. Thank you.